Why aren't we able to see stars in space?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics. I don't recall during the period of time that we were photographing the solar corona.
There are numerous reports of astronauts in space who expected to see thousands of stars sparkling brightly and brilliantly far from Earth in the vastness of the universe. Instead, they saw just an eerie blackness, moon images, and no stars. This even raised major concerns that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin's moonwalk were staged. But this is not the case. Let us now investigate why. There is a very simple reason for why cameras and humans cannot see stars in space. Why don't there appear to be any stars on the moon? Anyone who has seen the amazing shots from the Apollo 11 mission, in which Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins flew to the moon, will have wondered why there are no stars in all of those pictures. These photographs, which are among the most renowned in the history of spaceflight, depict a stunning lunar landscape, astronauts in their shimmering suits and the dark abyss of space. The starry sky we know from Earth, however, is utterly absent. But how is that possible? There is no atmosphere, clouds, or haze on the moon. In fact, the starry sky should be brighter and more magnificent than any other place on Earth. Let us take a closer look at the images. This is an original 1969 photograph. The sky is completely black with not a single star visible in the distance. In reality, the image should appear like this. For some, the lack of starry skies was a fundamental cause to doubt the Apollo mission's legitimacy. The lack of stars suggested that the lunar landing was manufactured in a Hollywood studio. Neil Armstrong and his colleagues were open about their lack of sightings of stars in space. The sky is deep black when viewed from the moon, just as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon, said Neil Armstrong. The Earth is the only visible object visible other than the sun. Is there, after all, a straightforward scientific explanation for the lack of stars? In addition, there are no stars in the videos. He was the most lonely man in history. In 1984, Bruce McCandless II began on a risky experiment. He was the first and still the only astronaut to travel through space without the use of any safety equipment. McCandless used NASA's then-new Manned Maneuvering Unit, a nitrogen-powered jetpack designed to allow humans to move freely in space. This historic moment was photographed and videotaped, culminating in some of the most memorable photographs in spaceflight history, with McCandless floating against a backdrop of space and Earth. Even in this video, McCandless is visible against a deep black background with not a single star showing. It's an amazing phenomenon that no glittering starlight can be visible in space images and movies. One would think that modern video technology, which is far more advanced than the cameras used in 1969, would be able to capture the stars in all their glory. However, this is not the case. Outside their protected space capsule, astronauts on the International Space Station frequently see only a uniform gloomy blackness. The real reason why there are no stars in space. The absence of stars in images and films from space does not indicate editing, fraud, or poor camera quality. The real cause, however, is concealed deep within the basics of photography. Cameras, whether old or new, catch light using particular principles. They employ the exposure triangle, which is a combination of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Lighting conditions are harsh on the moon, for example, because there is no atmosphere to disperse sunlight. During the day, the moon's surface and astronaut suits reflect a great deal of sunlight. The aperture determines how much light reaches the camera sensor. When there is a lot of light, such as from reflecting sunshine, it may be necessary to adjust the brightness to minimize overexposure. The shutter speed controls the length of time the sensor is exposed. In space, A long exposure period will cause bright objects to overexpose and stars to blur owing to motion. Finally, the ISO value influences the sensor's light sensitivity. A high value may be advantageous in low-light situations, but it might generate image noise if the brightness is too high. The camera settings must be modified to properly expose bright objects such as stars in space or on the moon. But that is not what Neil Armstrong and the other astronauts who filmed and photographed did. As a result, less faint things like stars fade into the backdrop. Even expert photographers, which most astronauts are not, would need to work in space with a complicated shading, exposure, and angle approach to accurately image the moon, stars, and all other objects. At the moment, the thought of a professional photo team in space employing shaders and lights to shoot images for a lunar calendar may seem antiquated. But who knows? Perhaps such possibilities will eventually become a reality through efforts like lunar colonization. Let's take it a step farther because this is only one component of the puzzle. It's not as if photos and films can't portray the stars. Armstrong described a blackness, and as a result, he did not see stars with his own eyes, the enigma of human perception. Because of an effect comparable to the exposure triangle in photography, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and all the other brave astronauts in space did not see stars. Our eyes, like cameras, naturally adjust to the brightest light sources in their surroundings. For example, when astronauts stand on the brilliantly lighted side of the moon, the intense light causes their pupils to shrink, allowing less light from distant stars to reach their eyes. This impact is also known to astronauts on the International Space Station. They too fail to detect stars in space while traveling in direct sunlight or in the presence of intense artificial light sources. Nonetheless, there are rare occasions when even space travelers can appreciate the full splendor of the starry sky. When astronauts step into the shadow of a big rock or other object on the moon that filters enough light from its surroundings, their eyes begin to acclimate to the darkness. The starry sky slowly begins to reveal its secrets at these times, and the unfathomable grandeur of the universe becomes revealed. Neil Armstrong felt this for a brief while when he stepped in the shadow of the lunar spacecraft, and astronauts on the International Space Station feel it as soon as the space station enters the Earth's umbra. Prove it to yourself. You don't have to go to space to witness the amazing effects of light and darkness. You may conduct a simple experiment at home to see how our eyes react to different lighting conditions. Enter a dark room and let your eyes to adjust to the darkness for a few minutes. After a while, you'll notice that your pupils widen to take in more light, allowing you to see more details in the room. Now take your phone and shine the flashlight or screen directly into your eyes. The rest of the room, which was previously visible, will be thrown into darkness. This is because your pupils constrict immediately to adjust to the strong light source, enabling less light to reach your eyes from the darker areas of the room. This experiment vividly demonstrates how our eyes constantly regulate light intake depending on the lighting conditions we are exposed to. It's the same technique that makes it difficult for astronauts to see stars when they're surrounded by the brilliant surface of the moon or the lights of the International Space Station. Experts attribute this perception to the lack of an atmosphere to soften the light, as well as the extreme silence and nothingness of space. Without the regular visual signals and light scattering that we associate with Earth, space appears more denser and more impenetrable. The term velvety provides a sense of depth and texture, almost as if space had a physical aspect of its own. Is it only the rare, overwhelming sense of total darkness, or is there anything else that makes dark space appear velvety or matter-like? Although interstellar space is frequently referred to be empty, this is not totally accurate. While space is far less thick than Earth's atmosphere, it is not entirely empty of matter. The space between stars is made up of a thin layer of gas and dust. This medium is primarily composed of hydrogen, although it also contains other elements and molecules. Microscopic particles, often known as cosmic dust particles, are produced by asteroids colliding, exploding stars, and other cosmic occurrences. Cosmic rays are high-energy particles. These particles are also emitted by a number of sources, including the Sun, other stars, and extragalactic occurrences. An analogy to enigmatic dark matter is apt when describing a velvety impression of the emptiness into which one can reach. Dark matter cannot be directly detected, and it is not genuinely dark, but observable. It is only recognizable due to its weight. Dark matter is found everywhere in space, including seemingly empty places. Furthermore, the emptiness is filled by a strange carpet of energy known as quantum field fluctuations. Particles arrive, neutralize, and then dissipate in incredibly short periods of time. They combine to generate a strange energy, about which little is known so far, and potentially something resembling a glimmer. According to Buzz Aldrin, it was black but had something like a velvety shimmer. These statements make it appear as if astronauts could detect the strange shimmer of empty space or a delicate material texture. This is only conceivable due to the lack of starlight, which would otherwise outshine this unfathomable blackness. Subscribe to receive notifications on new great videos.